Hello everybody, welcome back to our energy update for energetically sensitives and empaths for week 17, which is April 20th till 26th. Aired from TRANSCODES here in Colorado, my indoor office. Yes, we are heading towards brighter times. I'm planning on airing from my outdoor office here next week, but for now I still have to stay inside. It's too cold. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Smash the like button. Let me know where you're from. This is a live recording and this gives you the opportunity to ask questions. We have a lot to talk about today, and I'll give you a heads up here with my shirt. I'm wearing a green shirt, sorta, kinda. It's as green as it gets here in my closet. So we're looking at things relaxing just a little bit, but it's a bit more complex than that, guys. So remember, these energy updates are not predictions. They're not things that you should use to externalize your experiences to, you know, as in like setting yourselves up for things. So just because the energy barometer that you see here is on a certain color or on a certain intensity level of this gauge, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a bad week or a good week. All right, this week will be a good example this coming week, even though the barometer is actually still sort of deciding, you know, that it wants to go into green. There's still a bunch of surprises and not so nice things. So just because we're moving into times where things begin to expand a little, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be fine, or vice versa. I know there were a lot of people in these weeks here, in these past weeks when the barometer was on red or even beyond red, that didn't even dare to watch the update. You shouldn't be doing this. On the contrary, I mean, I can't, of course, tell you what to do, but the subjects I picked to talk about during these energy updates, they have relevance for this time, for the practical application. And so this next week, which is all sort of in the sign of applying what we've learned, refining, recalibrating, and engaging. And when we talk about this, you will see what I mean with, you know, facing things. So when you notice that that there's something that you see or like a sign, we talked about signs last time, right? Try to refrain from going into superstition, okay? Like every time this happens, you know, then this happens or something bad happens, okay? This is a part of your ego illusion. It's a trap, okay? It's going into premature conclusions, or a bit more negatively expressed, you know, into anticipation and preoccupation, and it leads to issues with where you direct your energy to, okay? So these old sayings, you do well what you dwell on, okay? But we'll illuminate this here in a minute. I wanted to look at last week real quick and do a little bit of a review. And yes, hello, South Africa. Hello, Trinidad, I see you. Thanks for coming, and thanks for holding the staff here with me. Most watch the edited version because I usually add a lot of infographics and a lot of sort of supportive material to the video and the visual here. So thank you for coming and spending your time with me here live. Makes me feel good. Thank you. All right, so let's look at last week. Last week, I did recommend a few things as energy tips, and there's a few things that will carry over into this week that we are looking at now, because you know, energies don't really function on a time or space bound plane. You know, this has nothing to do with weekdays or years even. However, there are some things, you know, that are in constant flux, and so we're dealing with remnants of the last week that affect the way we perceive our presence, and also, you know, the new energies that are already coming in. Many of you that follow the lunar cycles or astrology know we had a new moon here on the weekend. Was very, very intense. And there were some really big issues here for empaths and energetically sensitives, which I want to cover in depth because you don't really hear anybody else talking about it in this way, all right? And that had to do with our etheric reality, with our energetic being. Last week, I directed your attention towards, really looking at, of course, honoring what your needs are. This is sort of always the foundation of self-healing and working with those energies that we are exposed to. But I reminded you of the ego specialness and what this can do and how it can influence your perception, but also influence the way you see yourself. And so here at TRANSCODES, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned this last week. We were doing a really big intensive over the weekend to basically ride the wave, to go with these really intense etheric energies that were coming in with the new moon. And what this showed us was that the way we perceive ourselves here in the 3D, the part of our reality, the physical reality, not just in terms of body, but physical as in terms of solid, what we see as manifestations around us, does not always match up with our say emotional reality, our mental reality, our spiritual reality, or even our etheric reality. And these may all be terms to you that you have never really differentiated in this way. But when you do energy work, and of course I see the world and I see the things that are going on in you guys as always in these different categories, which is why I split up the energy tips for the week into physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and etheric, because there's different aspects to that. And for us to learn how to bring these together, our etheric reality, the reality of us as energetic beings. And you may notice that I don't use the word spiritual beings, because energetic beings entails really the physical, emotional, mental as well. Most people who use the word a spiritual being, want to signify the cluster of the unseen, but really our energetic being is composed of all of our parts, including our physical reality, our physical being. All right, so most of you who know me know this, that I find this one of the most important aspects here of this modern spirituality, that or the contextualization that I offer here of spirituality, namely to consciously and voluntarily include the physical, emotional, mental, because from an energetic point of view, you really can't separate those. So anyway, there was a bit of a surprise maybe for some people, and I'll get to the subject here, namely that there can be the situation where your etheric body, the unseen part, like say, just call it your aura or whatever, is extremely busy with something, and but your mind and your emotion and your body don't really know what it is, but they can be under the effects of it. They can feel that. And this is one of the biggest issues here for empaths and energetically sensitives and highly sensitive persons altogether, is that there's a lot of stuff going on that that we can perceive on some level, but we don't really know where it's coming from, what it means, and it scares us. It creates this feeling that we're not in control of this, and so many people have this unconscious fear of actually facing parts of their energetic reality, because they're afraid that they would discover something there that they can't identify with, or that would make them feel judged. And so last weekend, what was coming in was a really strong influx of this sixth chakra, third eye. I talked about the chakras that were affected last week, and I warned you, that there's going to be sort of a temptation to go into fantasizing and to go into confusion about this etheric reality. And here, this is what actually happened, okay, in 3D, here in my 3D. Since Saturday, I was in emergency energy coaching sessions non-stop, like 12, 14 hours a day, guys, with people having experiences, etheric experiences that they couldn't contextualize, and that scared the heck out of them. And part of that was OBEs, actual, out-of-body experiences, paralysis, where they found themselves pinned to their bed. They couldn't move, completely out of control of their physical, ET stuff coming in, sudden, sudden, I call this sudden because, for those of you like myself who are trained in energy work, this is not a unusual occurrence, but for someone who's not trained and this comes to you all of a sudden, this is really, really terrifying. Sudden sort of visuals of energies, okay? And for some, this comes in maybe with colors, maybe with sort of light experiences, and you see things like overlays, you see things morphing, you see things shifting in front of your eyes with your eyes open. Those are all things that happen when your third eye, your sixth chakra, is very, very open. And it was a little too open last week, which is why people felt a bit overwhelmed by that experience. So while many of you may have had just a sort of a slow weekend, felt a little more tired than normal, many people who are energetically sensitive had quite intense experiences. All right. And so here I wanted to use this opportunity to talk to you about what these things mean and what you can learn from them, or what maybe another way or more neutral, more constructive way to contextualize this. Out-of-body experiences, guys, has nothing to do with spirituality, period. It is a situation where your etheric body basically disengages from your physical body. And there's a huge misconception there in the spiritual scene that this would be something that would lead you to higher visioning. I know I'm going against the grain with this, but this is a really, really bad ego trap, okay? When it comes to visioning, to energetic visioning, OBEs will not get you to this place that you are seeking. When you want to vision, all right, when you want to use your energetic perceptivity for, like, say, precognitive information, or for, connecting with your true inner guidance, OBEs will not provide this for you, and here's why. Because the OBEs, when your etheric detaches from your heart, detaches from your physical, gets automatically pulled into the collective astral field. And this is a lower vibratory field, guys. This is where ghosts, where souls that are trapped, where, very low consciousness level entities and also darkness resides. And it's the junkyard of the collective human consciousness. While you can have, like, sort of what appears to be like a blissful vision, okay, and you may get a high out of this, this is your ego buying into this. This is your ego being trapped in this, oh, I'm having a cool vision, oh, this is all so blissful. And here at TRANSCODES, I have a few words that I use, as metaphors for that kind of sort of getting trapped in your ego, wanting to have, like these sort of celestial visions, and that's waterfalls and unicorns, right? Waterfalls and unicorns. So when you vision, okay, one of the biggest problems here is that there's an expectation, that there's an interpretation that there's your ego mind itself, you know, that for those of you who seek visions, you know, that of course you want to have a result, you want to have an outcome. And so the ego begins to interfere with what you're seeing. And that makes you, of course, susceptible to things that can actually lure your ego into believing that what you experience is a cool experience. So I want to take the ET stuff as an example. Guys, ET stuff is in the lower astral realm. This doesn't mean that it's not real. I'm not saying that. It is very common for people who, like myself, who are almost like professional visionaries, to see, you know, extraterrestrial life, to see entities that are not from this dimension. This is part of the deal when you know what you're doing in navigating dimensions. Okay, you will encounter beings in other dimensions, and it becomes almost like a normal thing for you, you know, to accept that the 3D realm, the 3D existence is not the only one that is there. From a scientific point of view, you know, the scientific part of me says, well, duh, you know, 3D is just one out of many, many, many dimensions. So to think that we are the only beings here in the entire universe, be it the way we think it is, with bodies or not, you know, is irrelevant. But the acceptance that there is something more out there than us, okay, that I think is a given. But to go and seek this and to seek the encounter, I would strongly, strongly recommend not to engage in this and not to get an ego kick out of this. And it doesn't matter how it comes to you. The trickiness of this lower astral realm is that it will use metaphors, it will use symbols, it will use visuals for you that lure you into thinking, oh, I'm talking to my angel beings, oh, I'm being led by the Divine Mother, oh, you know, I'm seeing, you name it. I don't want to sound too sarcastic here, but the whole point is that, you know, whatever you want to see, you will see, and it will make you believe you're having a special experience, you're being led somewhere, while in the meantime, unbeknownst to yourself, because you're not trained enough, your etheric is being hijacked. And this is why OBEs are so dangerous. It can actually lead to permanent damage in the etheric field of a person. And this is a big part of the work that we do here, the healing work that we offer, you know, is to help people to get back to that place, you know, where they can unify and where they can heal their etheric body, so that some of the mental, emotional, and often also physical impact that they're feeling, that this can be cleared out and reduced. But as long as the ego sort of dwells on that and sees that as a specialness or some kind of higher experience, you know, you will have a tendency to pull this in. I mentioned fragmentation last week already, and there are a few things I wanted to point out here, guys, that set your etheric body up for hijacking or for unwanted absorption. And that is, of course, and don't get me here from the wrong angle, I'm not talking about morals, I'm talking about hands-on energy work, okay? Smoking pot is probably one of the worst habits these days from an energetic point of view. Yes, I know that there's a lot of medicinal advantages, and like with a lot of things and plant medicines altogether, we have to make compromises here with the pros and the cons. But long-term use of marijuana is very unhealthy for your etheric because it rips holes, and these holes take many, many years to heal. All right, drinking alcohol or any kind of drug that literally sort of has that potential to lure your ego into a place where you feel more than you are, or where you feel safer than you are without it, or where you feel less pain, has the same property. It can open up your etheric field on the back end, and very often actually this happens on the back end of our etheric field. you know, literally here in the back, for lower vibratory energies to latch on. So the reason why I'm talking, or took the time here to talk about this here today, is that you need to take this seriously. And even if you don't know much about visioning, or you can't relate to any of the things that I've mentioned here, there comes a point when, like this past weekend, when even people who not interested in OBEs or astral visioning or anything like this suddenly experience this, and they freak out, okay? Because this is a very, very terrifying experience when you see visuals that entities entering you, or abduction, or when you're literally not able to move your body, that can drive people into of course a breakdown, but also literally into thinking that they're crazy and so forth. And all that creates a lot of physical, emotional, and mental, and also spiritual negative impact on us, all right? So the reason why I have been riding this specialness horse here for a couple of weeks now is because you need to understand that that is one of your biggest traps. Okay, so anything that makes you feel special, that makes you feel like, I'm this angel being, and or my friends are very special friends, it's spirit guides, I mean, not friends, it makes you susceptible to these things, guys. So please ask questions. This is something that I spent hours and hours in energy coaching for people. So use the text here, the commentary, to ask. I have no problems with openly talking about those things, okay? And if you want to know a little more, and perhaps it's easier for you to digest, to read something, then go to my blog at transcodes.com and read the etheric protection section there. There's a tab and it says etheric protection, and that gives you a lot of that information. All right, so then let's talk about how we can counteract this, and how we can learn how to become more whole, less fragmented, and therefore less susceptible to energetic absorption. Many of you, if not all of you, have this in common, that you perceive one of the biggest issues with your environment and with other people in the world altogether kind of as hostile. You perceive, you may not be able to explain it, but you perceive the exposure that you have as something that is tearing you down, or that is lowering your energy, and that is correct, but you are not aware of what in you and which of your habits are actually inviting this, or calling this back in, pulling this back in. And therefore, the first step I can give you in general here, not just for next week, but is to educate yourself about your energy body, and how all these things that I just mentioned, how they all relate. Because the more you know about this and yourself, and the more you can, the more congruent and the more okay you can become with your etheric self and what is going on there. Even if you don't have this, if you don't perceive this information in a visual way, you may just be more of a tactile and feel things more in your body, and other people are more auditory and hear this through different voices. It doesn't matter, but as long as you educate yourself on this, and you can begin to contextualize things better, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You don't have to avoid it. You don't have to cut this off and go into repression, or freak out when something happens. Okay, so it will help you to build confidence. It will make you empowered. It will make you stronger, and it will actually literally make you stronger by becoming aware of your etheric and working it. You will also learn how to strengthen it. Remember last week I said, learn to discern what makes you strong. Okay, so this was all talk about last week, okay? And now we're moving into like, what is the current situation and where are we heading? Okay, so It was, of course, no coincidence that last week was also the week of the most apocalypse date that I have seen in 1 month coming together. So first it was the 11th of April, then it was the 18th of April, now it's the 23rd of April, and then there's some who say it's the 24th of June, the end of the world, you know, tribulation, a rapture is coming above us, okay? And this has to do with what I just talked about, guys. This has to do with, you know, how well are you able to discern, to differentiate the things that are true and that are actually happening in etheric and that are just a result or an interpretation or a misguidance of the fear underneath it, okay? So there's, of course, there's and those have existed forever, you know, the type of people that have their predictions based on the Bible or the signs, you know, that are cited in the apocalypse, you know, there is no end to this. This has existed in the world forever, okay? No matter what culture you look at in the history of humankind, there was always, every generation had sort of their the end of all days fear, and this is a normal thing of the human ego. But for those of you here who are seeking a little more differentiated and a more true version of how all this sort of universal Wi-Fi is constructed, you can learn how to discern these things. So don't buy into these really intensive fear-mongering and in this context also often war-mongering tendencies that are coming in through the media, okay? Whenever a collective goes into fear, then these things will pop up. And we've had a few things. We've had the attack on Syria. We've had a lot of other stuff come forward as well. And of course, the whole ET thing with Nibiru and Planet X, you know, hitting the Earth. Guys, use your discernment when you read stuff like that, all right? It is not about you know, being led to the truth by some outer entity. Remember, we talked about externalization. If you externalize your power, your source of power, to some outside entities or energies or ETs or whatever, you are not standing in your power. And when you're not standing in your power, that's bad, okay? Just so you remember this. That's when you're susceptible, okay? I hope this came across. Matthew is sharing here, have felt an emotional calmness this week that I haven't felt for a long time. Weekend was intense, but the calmness has increased, you know, my ability to create a more neutral emotional space this week. And Matthew, this is what I've you know what I try to reflect in this energy barometer. Okay, so there can be intensities there, but you know, you may find yourself in a place where it is a lot easier for yourself to get out of things again, okay? And part of that, Matthew, is because you have been working with this for a while, okay? So that's nothing that makes you any special, but it allows you to you know, become more neutral when things come up. And of course, the emotional component, we'll get to this here in a little bit, can pull a person into intensity, and we still have some emotional intensity here going on. Thank you for sharing, Matthew. Marguzata is sharing, so when we find ourselves in specialness and we catch ourselves in it, what is the next step needed? First of all, I think the hardest part is for us to catch ourselves in specialness. And I mean, this is what I talk about really when I do energy coaching, helping people to identify these things. Each of our inner lexicon of sensation is a little different. So catching yourself, you know, going into specialness can feel differently than it does for somebody else. But the main point is that when you realize that your ego is latching onto something, and the way I do this with myself is that, you know, whenever I feel my ego kind of go, yeah, I want to hold on to this, I want more, I want harder, I want, you know, then this is a signal for me that my ego is latching onto something. There's a juice there. There's a payoff there. So I get naturally suspicious about this. And then I literally work with my ego. I engage with my ego and say, hey, okay, I hear it, but hang on. Let me stay neutral. Let me look at this for real. Is this actually making me stronger? Is this actually getting me where I need to be? Is this actually something that is true to me? Is this authentic to me? So the next step after you may or may not, but, you know, like say you caught yourself, you know, sort of latching onto specialness, is to tone it down, to go into neutrality, and then, you know, to reassess, to recalibrate. Do I truly need this? Okay, so I don't know why, but there's an example that is coming up in my head right now. You know, someone who has a tendency to cope with intensity or with being a little low, say through shopping. Okay, so there's a lot of people out there. Our whole consumerism is based on that. You know, we go out and we want to feel better, so we go shopping. We go in a store and we see all these cool clothes, and you know, and we have an armful of clothing, and the ego says, "Yeah, get this. Oh, and get this. Oh, you'll look awesome in this. And yeah, get this." And you're standing in line at the register and you're looking at all these clothes. This is the moment where you can sort of reassess things. That's when you can say, you look at it and, do I really need this? Does this really make a difference for me? Or can I skip this? This is discernment. Is this really true to me? And this has to do with the challenge here for the next week. The challenge is literally to work with our fears of identifying, you know, what our ego latches onto and what we identify with. So everything that we identify with, a picture of ourselves or the way we want other people to see us or what we believe our strengths are, leads to ego identifications. And ego identifications are not true. They mess with our perception. Okay, this is the very short version of a really sort of 2-hour-long lecture, how that happens. But everything that you identify with produces an overlay, produces a mental and emotional overlay that can filter the way you perceive the world. It's like you put shades on in different colors, and then you see things the way your ego want to see this. This is what an identification is. And specialness has to do with identification, because if we feel like, say, due to some unresolved issues, and which are often linked to inner child stuff, which is also part of the challenge in this week. We have an increased need for validation, or an increased need for attention, or an increased need for something telling us that we are good enough or that we are worthy. All right, then we will have a tendency to go into ego specialness, because it allows us to produce that feeling like, okay, yes, I'm good enough, I'm good enough. The problem with the specialness, as you can see, it's the other side, or the other extreme of the pendulum. In order to feel worthy, in order to feel the validity of my own existence, I need to feel special. I need to feel above. I need to feel unique. I need to feel, that I am more. Okay, and this is where the ego identifications grip. Thank you for asking. It's a really good question. Yes. All right. So, and keep asking, guys. This is wonderful for me to be able to respond to what to your feedback and also your questions. So let's look at next week then in a nutshell, because there's a bunch of things. I won't have the time to explain them all. I at some point have explained them before. But what makes the bumpy ride here, that I warned for, is of course the issue that there are things in us that we don't want to see, that we can't see, that we're not ready to see yet, or that we are not really willing to work with. And this is what leads to, you know, shadow and all this kind of stuff, and to coping, you know, like we have to sort of make up for things. So last week we talked about repression. This week I would like to talk about avoidance, namely the avoidance of some of the stuff that is there, and we know it's there, but for some reason we don't want to work with this, and this creates all kinds of habits in us, you know, that literally invite sort of the negativity, or the things that we don't want in our lives, or the things that make us weak, or the things that hold us back, or the things that, you know, stop us from expressing who we truly are. It re-energizes them. And one of the biggest thing here for this week is the reoccurrence, and I hate to say it, but the reoccurrence of this whole cluster of inner child, karmic family, and our relationship with masculine and feminine energies. And here at TransCODES, we worked on this within the last 10 weeks intensively, so that we could start connecting the dots, so that we could start to see how all this is connected. How is my lack of money connected to some of unresolved inner child issues, and some of my karmic aspects that I've inherited, or some of my personal karmic aspects, the collective, and why do I keep getting stuck in the same place? All right. This is what I call physical integration, and you may understand now why I pointed out in the beginning physical, not just on a bodily level, but on a 3D level. It's about the integration of these things, and when we're not willing to face certain things, certain parts, you know, it's like not looking into certain corners at your house when you clean it. You know, what happens over time is that the dirt, the residue accumulates there, and they become, you know, or they are these blind spots that we have that sort of unconsciously pull negativity, pull, you know, lack and so forth back into our lives. So, you know, this is a week to clear this up, guys. I would strongly, strongly recommend you to work with this. And I have some cool tips here for you, you know, how to address this. But it's about, you know, these really deep and lower vibratory things in us, you know, such as shame and guilt, and for some of you also regrets, or you know, betrayal and injustice. You know, this whole cluster of like these really deeply anchored fears that we have. All right, and you have to face those things. You have to engage with them. And the reason why I called this week's energy update "Engage" is because there is like a choice that needs to be made, and this choice is to actually look at it, to follow the impulse, to face it, and to work with this. You may not have the resolutions, the fixes here. You don't need to, because just by facing it, you're shifting your energy into a higher vibratory place. Then, of course, there's a few things that you need to learn, how you can actually hold this, and how you can work with this, and how you can expand into this. All right, but the whole point, you know, being here with going into congruence between your energetic, your etheric reality and your physical reality, is to look at the things that are not matching up. All right, and some things that you can do in general to do this is, of course, to stay open and to really, you know, allow your life to show you what you need to look at. This following week will be a wonderful opportunity to, especially with your family, to go into resolution of some things and to really clarify things. You know how a lot of things that we remember from our childhood, we remember them, of course, from our viewpoint, from our filter, through our lens, how we perceive things, you know, back when we were 3 or when we were 8 or so. But if we have that opportunity to actually talk to family members and just, you know, stay as neutral as we can, you know, to not jump into the fights or jump into the patterns that are attached to that right away with these people, there's a lot of things we can clarify. And one of the things that I wanted to suggest to you, seems completely off the topic, but it's not, is to invest, if you have the money, like these $60 or $80, I forgot how much it was, on this Ancestry DNA test. This is a really, really cool way for you guys to connect with some of your karmic inheritance, all right, through your lineage. through your ancestors. And this is real. This is not, you know, somebody telling you about your past lives, or, you know, this is you experiencing this. You go there, and it can be the most healing thing, you know, to connect with all these, you know, based on your genes, of course, you know, these aspects that you have in you. So it's very, very healing. It's a beautiful process. It's a great investment. I would strongly recommend that to everyone who feels like that there are some karmic aspects, you know, that are holding you back. Don't go into past lives, because past lives really are not very relevant in this whole thing. You know, they just explain a few things. But when you go into your lineage, there's a lot of things that you can see, like how, you know, your perception of the world was actually influenced by how your ancestors perceived the world. Okay. And again, here, consult the TransCODES blog, you know, and go into the tab of karma and karmic relationships, because that explains a lot of other things to you as well, how this reflects in your relationships. The main thing here for this next week is really to engage, okay, and to engage with these things, with these inner guidance, with these inner promptings, with these things that are coming to you through your energetic sensitivity, and to not shy away from it, and to not like see this as a curse or whatever. Because the more you try to deflect it, the more you try to avoid this, the more fragmented your energy becomes, and it's almost like an amplifier. So go into inner communication with yourself, you know, seek the connection with your true self, talk to your true self. This reminds me, we have the next free Connect with Your True Self session tomorrow night at 10 p.m. guys. And also, I don't know if you know this, but once a month I do what I call an energetic adjustment session, helping your energy body to adjust to these current energetic waves that are coming in. And the next one is on Saturday night at 10 p.m. Energetic adjustment session. Working with May energies called Liberation. So check this out on the TransCODES calendar. But anyway, it is about, you know, linking into your true self, so that things can come to congruence, and you can move back into this state of wholeness. And what happens when you do this, okay, is the opposite of an OBE. What happens when you when your physical and your etheric reality become one is that you are fully plugged into divine Wi-Fi, as I call it. You are fully connected with you know, the total oneness, so to speak. You know, we're living in a holographic universe, guys, and that means that the whole is contained in every tiny little piece. But if the piece is very fragmented, it is very difficult, you know, or you being the piece, you know, you being, you know, this holographic aspect of the whole. If it's very fragmented, you have to learn how to tap into this whole state again, wholeness. All right, as the major healing path here for healthiness, for happiness, and for abundance. Yes, and someone is sharing here. I thought the data from the DNA test was a trick. No, it's not. No, this is just pretty. I mean, I come from Iceland. You know, we've had the first a national genealogical database, which is actually kind of cool, because in Iceland we can literally type in a name and see how far we're related. But we're only 300 and something thousand people, and we have very, very good records that are 1,000 years old. So the research behind that is that's solid. That's actually really cool, because it helps to you know, follow you know, the certain diseases and stuff like that, and how they genetically inherit. And the ancestry DNA, I don't know the companies, that there's more companies than one that does that. You know, what they do is basically they compare the genetic data of all the people that sent us in, and it's real. But of course, you got to understand also, this is something that I've warned of before. You're also giving away your genetic material there. So you don't want to like go overboard because they have social aspects to that as well, where you can connect with other people. So I would not recommend that. I would just recommend to go into this the genealogy and the history of your genome. Which leads me to something that I wanted to talk about today, but I won't have the time, is really, you know, like how can we actually work with this genetic information ourselves? How can we learn to do this? And the energetic adjustment session, for instance, is an energy session where I actually work with your mitochondrial DNA. And the mitochondrial DNA is something that is inherited through the female lineage. And there's topics such as epigenetics tied to this, and I've talked about this in the past, and I'll probably have to talk about this next week. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because there is so much new innovation coming forward, and things that, you know, people like myself, energy workers and healers, from, you know, have been pointing at for such a long time, that is now starting to become attention in science and medicine and so forth, as you know, as a reality. And that is, of course, not just the effects of remote or distance healing, but even things such as beginning to understand that the language of our DNA is not just through physical 3D manipulation. There is a way for us to tap into our genes, into our DNA, and change it and alter it and bring it back to the original state, the healthy, the whole state, remember, that can cure diseases. The only thing that science hasn't really figured out yet is how to transcode that, how to speak that language. And they're going, medicine and science are going into the direction of developing artificial intelligence to be able to do this. Personally, you know, I'm not a friend of artificial intelligence, because I think it's one of the big dangers here for the next decades. But I already know how to speak that language. Anybody who can tap into divine Wi-Fi knows how to tap into your cell memory, how to tap into your DNA. And this is what energy healing is really about. So I can only scratch the surface here for you guys. But this will lead me to talk about epigenetics and holoceuticals, as I call them, you know, nutrients and things that we can add to our holographic information that can heal us. Sounds very technical, I know, but that's sort of like where, you know, my specialty comes in. Anyway, looking at the next week here, what are we dealing with from an energetic level? Most of all, the continuation of the first chakra issue that we've already been talking about for a couple of weeks. So first chakra, that's your root chakra, that has to do with your family. It has to do with your stance in life. It has to do with your ability to support yourself, okay? It has to do with a lot to do with money and wealth and security that comes through that. So specifically here for this following week, you're going to get pulled into issues with that, around that. We also having, the main sort of energetic sensations that come with first chakra stuff is, first of all, you know, it makes us feel unrooted. It makes us feel like we don't belong. It makes us feel ungrounded. So the grounding here is an energy tip for the first chakra that also weaves through some of the other tips that I already gave you with your etheric and so forth. But on a symptom level, you know, it makes people have, you know, issues with their teeth, issues with their feet, issues with their mobility apparatus, you know, hips and knees. But also, and this is what I'm feeling coming in here for the next week, with the bladder. You know, kidneys was more last week. This coming week is more the bladder. So it has to do with releasing the residues, you know, of our life, or, you know, lifetimes, if you will, doesn't matter. But also sinus. So the first chakra, when it comes in that constellation with the fifth chakra, as we will see it here in the next week, fifth chakra is our throat, You know, everything like sort of around here, linking us to our expression, the expression of truth, moving into truth, congruence, and so forth. You can expect, you know, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but some of that sinus stuff flaring back up. Okay, because this really needs to come out. The sixth chakra is not going to be that open as it was last week, but fifth and sixth chakra want to work together, and there's a little bit of a fight there. So in the process of that, I'm expecting people to come up with another round, or maybe the last round, hopefully, of sinus and cold infections and issues with your teeth. The sixth chakra, which is the third chakra, that the third out of three that will be affected the most last week, you know, your third eye, you know, your perception, your vision, you know, this needs to be refined now. This needs to be recalibrated, okay? And that's where my overall tip, engage, comes in. So engage with these parts of you. And how is this going to play out? In the edited version, you're going to see this all listed here on the left. On your 3D, on your physical level, very, very important now to reconnect with your body. I mean, this would be bold and underlined, you know, because we're probably going to be dealing with this for the next 6 weeks. We really have to put into action what we've learned here in these past months, and we have to integrate it into the physical. Physical integration is your biggest theme here for the next probably 5-6 months till the beginning of October. So start with physical exercise, and I know I repeat myself here, but this is really important. So pay attention to your body, you know, see your body as sacred, and include your car. Okay, your car is an extension of your body. It's a vehicle as well. And even your house is, you know, remember the corners, you know, clean up, you know, the corners, the stuff that you don't want to look at. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to lift your energies. It's going to raise your vibration. It's going to help you to shift your energy. On an emotional level, you know, the guilt and shame aspect that I've mentioned, that comes in through the inner child. Once more, of course, it is the you know, not repressing anything, but you have to be willing to engage with that. You have to be willing to go into the expression of that. You know, if you don't already do this, write your emotions down, you know, and reflect on things. You know, if you can, it'd be a good time to engage with others, you know, and to seek others, maybe family members. This is what I see big time here for the next week, and talk about things. You know, you may not be able to find resolutions right away, but you are unlocking these stuck energies in you so that you don't become that susceptible anymore. Mentally, we're still dealing with limiting beliefs. This plays out specifically here in regards to money issues. You have to liberate yourself from these limiting beliefs and this lid, you know, the squeeze that we talked about. This lid that you feel, where you feel like a catch-22, where you feel cornered, where you feel like no matter what I'm doing, you know, I'm going to be screwed. Okay, you got to liberate yourself out of that, and a lot of that has to do with your limiting beliefs. And this leads back to what we talked about earlier, the specialness and the ego traps. You've got to be able to feel that. You don't need fixes. Let go of your fixation of fixes, because the fixation that you have, and this is almost like 100% certain, is the wrong direction. And so many of you who work with me know this, that, you know, when they ask me this question, well, what can I do when I discover my ego is, you know, sort of limiting or is influencing my perception? Well, let it go. You know, and the best way to do this is to just assume that your ego is involved in 99% of all your choices, okay? And if you want to shift something, if you want to break through something, then just do the opposite. If you do the opposite of what your ego suggests you, when your ego says, yeah, you know, then just do the opposite, because your chances of actually coming up with better results is much, much higher than doing the same old. Sorry for the intensity here. You can tell I've talked about this quite a bit this last week. Socially and in relationships, you know, it's really important that you see that there too, and that you reframe some of the things, you know, the complaints that you have, or these, you know, whenever we feel unconscious guilt and shame, we also tend to blame. Okay, so catch yourself blaming, because this is most likely your ego doing it. Not to say that you have to suck everything up or that you're not right, but your limited perception will lead you to conclusions and will lead you to fixate on things that are not good for your energy. Okay, and this leads me back to closes that loop from the beginning with the you do well what you dwell on. You know, catch yourself complaining, catch yourself nagging, because these things literally re-energize and re-traumatize your problem. Okay, if you want to get out of this, you need to break through this and catch yourself. And then the next step to that is inviting new energies to come in, no matter how limited you feel. And some of these practical tips, that came forward here in this last week, where we talked about how to invite abundance. You know, when you feel like you can't do anything because you don't have any money, you need to reallocate your resources, guys. Because if you nag, if you blame, if you complain, if you justify, if you're afraid, if you avoid, this takes up a lot of your energy, and that energy needs to be liberated so that it can flow into manipulation. So that it can flow into manifestation. That was an interesting speako. So that your energy can you know, really align to abundance as opposed to lack. Because every time you complain, you justify, blah 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 blah, you are re-energizing lack. One of the things that came forward here as practical tip: get yourself some flowers on your table, align to beauty, align to the abundance through that. And if you want to go a step further, you know, get yourself some seeds, you know, plant something or seed something out and see it grow, because this helps your energy to get reminded on this like really strong divine creation energy that can be unfolded this way. Spiritually, you know, I've already mentioned this, you know, work with your ancestors, work with your karmic family, work with your inner child. This will help you to break through some things, and I wouldn't be surprised if you have some really, really cool new insights that change your perspective entirely on things. And energetically, you know, it's the alignment again here. You know, those of you who want to work on this etherically, you know, grounding is, of course, you know, first chakra is an important aspect, and you need to catch these energetic habits that you have that lead to fragmentation. You have to understand that the consolidation of your energy field and the alignment of your energy field is what matters. Not what you see and not what you experience, but the alignment, because that is what basically creates the future manifestations. All right. And sorry, guys, I know this was a long energy update here today. I apologize. There's going to be the edited version very soon here. I have to get ready for the crypto spiritual energy update, which is translating all this into the crypto world. I'm already over time, so I will let you go here. Thank you all for coming. It's wonderful. Yes, Matthew, it's always in the simple solutions. It's only the ego specialness that refuses the simplicity in things. And I hope to see you here next week again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to get a reminder whenever I go on live, then click that little bell button here on YouTube. Okay. See you guys soon. Hope you have a good week. All the best. Bye-bye.